Welcome to Capes, Cows and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. And welcome to our weekly review show of the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, WandaVision. Today we'll be looking at the first two episodes of the show, directed by Matt Shakman, who is the director for the entire series, and written by creator of the show, Jac Schaeffer and Gretchen Enders. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster, writer for Fresh Take, and sound designer. And as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-host,
David Osgar. I'm a editor on Fresh Take Hub and a freelance film and entertainment journalist. So yeah, happy to be on once again, especially talking about the MCU. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. And joining us for these weekly reviews of WandaVision, we have a very special guest, Tom Gapper. Introduce yourself, Tom. How you doing?
Hi there, guys. Glad to be on the show. I'm Tom, as they say, and, I am this show's resident comic book guru. So, look forward to being here.
That's right. We've got 9 of these episodes to cover over the next, I think, 8 weeks, unless they might double up in the last episode. We're not entirely sure yet. But before we get into the actual show itself, the listeners pretty much already know mine and Dave's opinions on the MCU, who our favorite characters are and stuff like that. But as you said up top, you are the comic guru, Tom. So why don't you sort of explain to us and to the listeners your sort of relationship with both these characters, Wanda Maximoff and Vision, and also your relationship with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole?
Happy to. So I'll start off talking about the MCU a bit more broadly. So obviously I have always been a huge fan of the MCU from start to finish, ever since the first Iron Man film, since Nick Fury appeared at the end, offering him a place on the Avengers. I could see that something special was brewing, and it's been a wild ride over the years. I've loved pretty much every film that's come out. When Age of Ultron came out, I actually went to a 22-hour marathon of all the films leading up to it, which was a very fun experience, actually. So I've always loved the films, and I've loved Vision and Wanda especially since the moment they were introduced, because generally speaking I've always been a big fan of them in the comics. Wanda especially is one of my favourite characters in comics. I've recently been reading a bit more into her solo run coming out of 2016, one of the best runs on comics that you'll ever read. Artistically and story-wise, it's just a work of art. And then Vision, of course, we got that famous Tom King run, which was iconic for the character, and just the character has been a staple to the Avengers for years. He's kind of almost like the Martian Manhunter of the Avengers. So I was very, very hyped when this show was announced. I loved watching it, and I can't wait to talk about it today, to be honest. I've got a lot to talk about.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely plenty to discuss this show, and I think the main question everyone has is, what the hell is going on in this show? Dave, I mean, let's give a refresher for the audience as well, but obviously you've been rooting for this show, just like me, for a while now, because Wanda and Vision have become your couple of favorite characters in the MCU, haven't they?
Yeah, I think if we want to intro into like our conversation about it, we need some sort of, song or something, don't we? Like, Dave and Jake move into town, they're gonna... So I'll stop that now before anybody, bust their earbuds anyway. So, we've obviously been really hyped from all of the trailers and everything like that, as we've been covering those and, talking in length about Disney Plus, originals, which are going to very much fill up this year. And when we started this podcast, obviously we've been talking a lot of, DC or alternate Marvel in the case of, films that are actually coming out. So, like New Mutants, etc., which isn't, MCU. So it's been weird that we haven't actually talked about the MCU in a big way or in a big review yet, because obviously there's a pandemic going on, so it's pretty much had a longer break than they initially intended, which was, all the way back with Far From Home. And while I don't think that they originally intended for this obviously to be, obviously they didn't intend it to be the next entry in the MCU, it's a very weird and interesting place to actually revisit the MCU. I recently rewatched the key sort of Avengers films and the stuff featuring sort of Captain America, Falcon, Wanda to get ready for all of these series. So yeah, it's interesting watching it from that perspective as well. So yeah, very, very interesting. And definitely some thoughts on, like I said, the fact that we've had all these trailers and all this speculation for so long. I don't know if you could come into this show without all of that. I think, if somebody just like, if you were a complete blank slate, so say like that worked really well for Endgame in the sense of like, hey, you want to go into this film seeing as little as possible because that's the fun of experiencing it. This kind of does require those trailers and that sort of telling you like, look, this is what to expect. I think if somebody went into this having no idea, having seen nothing at all, they would be like, what the hell is going on? Which, again, we'll probably get onto later. But yeah, that's interesting aspect I find of it as well.
Yeah, definitely, because that was actually one of the things I was thinking about watching this show, and that we're watching these characters on this journey that we don't really know what's going on. But at the same time, I think our relationship with these characters, because we've seen them for the last, I don't know, 8 years, was it been Age of Ultron was 6 years ago. So yeah, for the last 6 years, we've grown with these characters. So I don't know if that's a hindrance or if that's a plus, because I'm still hesitant to say this, but I don't, because I want to see how the show pans out till the very end. But so far from the first 2 episodes, I feel as if this is a jarring show to get into if you're not familiar with the MCU. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's kind of jarring, even if you've been a big fan of the MCU, just because it's a huge departure from the usual formula that you've gotten used to. But yeah, I think definitely if you went in with no knowledge of these characters' history within the larger universe, I don't think there would be much hope of you understanding really what's going on. I mean, I barely understand what's going on. And I've seen every film maybe like 3 or 4 times minimum. So yeah, it's I don't think it's one for the fresh people, the people just being introduced to the MCU. It's definitely probably more for the die-hard fans or the veterans of the Marvel films.
See, I was thinking about this though, because in some ways, I don't know, I didn't feel as if like, oh, you need to have seen the MCU to know what's happening, because again, I think even if you got rid of that classic opening now, the Marvel logo, then you might especially think that like, oh, this is just some sort of like weird, funny sitcom spin-off or something. Obviously there is the fact that the 2 characters are from Marvel properties. So you wouldn't go into it thinking like, oh yeah, this is a genuine sitcom. But, it doesn't tail end itself off of anything specific. Obviously later on, I probably assume they will. But, if you're watching this just, again, as a fresh viewer now, you might just think like, okay, yeah, something's going on here. It's a bit weird. But I'm assuming that these characters have been a couple and stuff before. Because I was actually watching it thinking, I was like, my mum could maybe appreciate this. And she's the kind of person who like might have gone to the cinema and watched a few of the Marvel films, as things to do, or might have seen them on TV. She enjoys them now and again, but it's not like she's like, yes, I must watch the newest one. But because of all those sitcom throwbacks, I was like, yeah, she might actually enjoy this. So I think that there is an appeal maybe for new viewers as well, because there's something, that a lot of fans of, comic book media aren't usually affiliated with, which is old-time sitcoms and stuff like that, which, other types of audiences might be more familiar with as well. So I think it could bring in new people in that sense and have the idea of like, oh, well, let me go back and watch, what they're talking about and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think I'd actually like agree with you to a degree there, and I'm certainly not saying the people who maybe have never seen an MCU film couldn't enjoy the show, but like, for example, I imagine the whole show has an incredibly different dynamic between 2 people, one of whom knows that Vision is dead, and the other who doesn't know this. Like, if you don't know, then yeah, I agree with you. You're probably just going to be thinking, oh, this is some kooky sitcom. But when you know and you're watching it, you're like, well, but what's he doing here? Like, what is happening here? Like, it just adds a whole different dynamic to it. So I think that's just clarifying what I said before. Yeah, I agree with you. People can still enjoy it with limited knowledge, but the added knowledge and appreciation of the history just adds this whole other weird, surreal dynamic to it. Well, I said to you last night, David, like the whole show is just hilarious and surreal as all hell. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it currently anyway.
Yeah, I would sort of sort of agree with you guys in the sense of, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head, Tom, where I think the MCU has a really good history of, like, with their movies, that you don't necessarily have to watch all the other MCU movies to enjoy this film. Like, as a standalone blockbuster, they all tend to work. They all bring the thrills and excitement you expect. But if you are a fan of the MCU, it adds so much more weight because of your history with the characters and growing up with them. So I think you said it, it's the same here. Because we've grown with Wanda and Vision and we know what sort of happens to these characters, in Infinity War and Endgame, there's a bit of like, oh, what the hell is actually going on here? While people new to this might not know, they, like you said, they might just go, oh, okay, let's enjoy this sort of sitcom, not knowing that one of the main characters is actually dead.
Yeah.
My wife and her flying saucers.
My husband and his indestructible head.
Aren't we a fine pair?
All right, let's get into the actual episodes themselves. I'll start with you, Tom. What's your overall big picture thoughts of these first two episodes? The first one being a 50s setting and the second one being a 60s setting of the sitcoms.
I personally loved it. I think it's very clear what they're doing here with like each episode probably exploring a different era of television, so to speak. So I'm very excited for that. But yeah, the first two episodes especially, like the first one was very, very obviously heavily based off I Love Lucy. But it worked so well. And like I was kind of expecting the show's like real strong point to be obviously when they just break away from the sitcom and move into the surreal stuff. And in a way it was, when those moments happened, it was amazing to see. But actually the comedy within the episodes was just really funny. I found myself laughing a lot, especially at Paul Bettany in the second episode. It just, I just loved it so much. But yeah, as I said, it was as well the moments where it does get surreal, like when in the first episode when Mr. Hart is choking on, I think it was a strawberry or something, and just his wife is just there repeating "stop it" over and over and over again, like getting just more deranged. And I was just sat there just going, the heck is going on here? And yeah, just then the way that Wanda just goes from like being this Lucy-esque character to just her face just goes like just back to the normal Wanda, and she's like, Vision helping. And just in that moment, I was just kind of like, right, okay, how much control does Wanda have over this situation right now? Because at the initially you're thinking like, clearly she's like broken by grief and she's creating this like fantasy world. But then as the episode's going on, you're like, but is there actually another reason she's creating this fantasy world? So it's going to be very interesting to see the story develop, and it'll be very interesting to see more of the Beekeeper Man. Not entirely sure there what that guy's deal is, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, very similar. I think, I really, was on board with this idea again from the trailers and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, it's crazy to watch it looking back even, we've talked again about, if you hadn't seen the trailers and stuff like that, but it is just, there'll be a Captain and Falcon. Why do I keep saying that? Falcon and Winter Soldier show, and it'll be like, oh, who will be the new Captain America? There'll be a Loki show, and it'll be all about his mischief, and there'll be a Ms. Marvel show. You're like, yeah, and then it's just like, and there'll be a WandaVision show, which will pay tribute to the American sitcoms of time gone by. Like, wait, what? It's just like all of them like sound like your typical stuff, and then this is just like what? And that. They go with this straight away. I think I'm torn on whether I did want some sort of introduction to the sort of concept, but again, I'm holding back because I'm like, right, well, let's just see how this pans out. So I was surprised there wasn't some form of like, I suppose kind of what we had at the end of the episode at the beginning, which is the kind of like monitoring of what's happening. But I did again have to respect that it just went in with the straight, sitcom opening. I was maybe expecting whether you would see where Wanda was after Endgame or something like that. But nope, it goes straight in, which, you do have to respect. And it does help you to absorb you into that world of the sitcom. And like Tom said, they're really funny and the scripts were really well written. I think that there's like loads of great gags in there. And again, the performances from the get-go. I've seen a lot of people saying about, how already, even from the trailers, people were saying, it's almost as if Marvel is trying to like eye up like awards like the Emmys and stuff like that. And already from the get-go, I was like, yeah, I could see that, because you could see it from the trailers, but especially from that opening scene where it's the kind of, like, oh, my wife and the flying saucers, both of them are absolutely killing it in that scene. Elizabeth Olsen is fantastic, and Paul Bettany, as we'll go into, but they're just nailing it. I'm really amazed by like how much they're like encapsulating the charm of, like you said, those shows like I Love Lucy, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Bewitched, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I really enjoyed all of it. I thought it was great. You had those darker, more twisted sort of moments, which I'm looking forward to getting more of that, of, as we've seen in the trailers, that sort of peeling away of reality. And yeah, and I think that, again, I maybe would have liked a bit more, we'll go into more. I have problems with the credits, but not so much just like, we know that's a Disney Plus problem, but even so much like the Marvel credits, the way that they've done it and the way that they did that end scene. And I suppose that wasn't so much the case maybe for episode 2, but yeah, I think they could improve that, and I think that they do need to realize they're doing a TV series and not doing like a movie. But again, there was such commitment to the sitcom aspect and so many references, so many great jokes, and the cast are all fantastic that, yeah, I really enjoyed it and thought that, this is great. It's just something refreshing and new.
Yeah, both of you have stole everything I've wanted to say. That's it's 3 for 3. I echo all your thoughts. I love the first 2 episodes. Unlike you, Dave, I don't know, but I actually love the fact that they just went straight in with this. We're going for it. This is the sitcom show. Maybe it's because, we've been seeing all the trailers and we've been hearing about the show for so long. We're like, we know what this show is. Like you, I really admire it. I respect it. They've got the balls to go for this. And, the writing is actually really good. Like, to tap into like all the sort of references and the style of writing that they were doing in the 50s and 60s, but at the same time there's something modern about the writing in here as well, with the gags as well. Because the gags, they are very like those 50s and 60s sitcoms, but at the same time they play in perfectly with the type of humor the MCU has established. So I think the writing on it is fantastic. The performances, like you say, the 2 leads are amazing, but my personal favorite performance is Catherine Hahn. She just stole the show for me, especially episode 1. I was just like, wow, what a character this is. Like, and I have some theories about, but we'll get into that in a bit. But like you said, Tom, I was so intrigued when all the little, the bits of actual reality coming in, like the helicopter and then, the beekeeper and all that stuff. I was just going, what the hell is going on? But I'm fascinated by what's going on, because I'm like, I know this is going to lead to something, and they're throwing you into this sitcom setting, but at the same time it's just going to be a slow burner show. I think very similar to like Mandalorian. Like the first half of that show was very we're going to this mission and that mission, and it's a slow burner. This one is going to be similar to that aspect, but different in the sitcom setting, where they're just going to be dropping these little Easter eggs. And I think as the episodes are going further along, they're going to be dropping more Easter eggs, more of reality will be start to warped in, and the episodes might even get longer. So, but yes, I also, like Dave, I have some criticisms on the credits thing, but I don't blame the show for that per se. So.
How to treat your husband to keep your husband. And let me tell you, what Ralph could really use is how to goose your wife so you don't lose your wife.
Let's get into like the actual story elements of the show and the formula. So we already spoke about that we liked the sitcom. We all think it sort of worked for the MCU? Do you think that this is a good way of telling the story and a new direction for the MCU? What do you think, Tom?
I think definitely, because they are leaning so heavily into the sitcom aspect, but then there's that obvious thing of like something's not right with reality. Wanda's clearly losing her grip a little bit, or is either being attacked by someone else. We don't know yet. We'll talk about that more later. So because it goes so heavy into the sitcom aspect, when it does break into those surreal moments, it does add that extra like dynamic to it where you just like, it just doubles down on the what the hell is going on, because I thought the show was one thing, now it's another. So I think like as the show goes on, I think we're going to probably see it leaning more into the surreal side, breaking away from the sitcom stuff, and I think that's going to work wonders. Like I think by the end of the season the tone is going to be so different from the start that just it's going to be a huge wild ride and a wild journey, and I'm looking forward to see like how it pans out. But I do think it is a smart creative decision by the writers and the directors to play it out like that, because I love comedy when it gets surreal, and I think seeing a comedy show slowly turn into some surreal reality bending show is just going to be something to watch. And I think like going back to what you guys were saying earlier, I think it'll end up being a candidate for the Emmys very easily. It'll probably take home a few awards. I would be shocked if it didn't take home any awards, to be honest. Even though we're only 2 episodes in, we don't know how it's going to pan out. I just think I can't see how this show can't be successful, just going off what we've seen so far and what's been hinted at as possible plot points. Like any of the possible plot points that you think might be happening, whether it's Wanda's losing her mind, whether it's someone's attacking her, whether it's something else entirely that we just like don't know about, it's going to play out in such a way that I think we're all going to end up being blown away by it, just because of the nature of the story and how they're playing it out. And I think based off these first 2 episodes, I trust the guys in charge of the show implicitly to make this a show worth watching. I think they're nailing it so far, and I hope they're going to continue to nail it. But if we're going off like Disney Plus's track record with The Mandalorian, I think it is just going to get better and better with each episode.
Yeah, I'd like to, before you give your thoughts on that, Dave, I'd like to add the element of Disney Plus. Do you think, because we've got Disney Plus now, they can tell these type of stories? Do you think we wouldn't have gotten anything like this if they had stuck to the movies?
No, I definitely don't think they would, and they've said that, like Kevin Feige has said, TV has allowed us this opportunity for us to explore not even just different avenues and different types of stories, because again, you could say that there's a history of that with films like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ragnarok, etc. But what they're also able to do is to flesh out these characters and deep dive into them a bit more, again, which the Avengers films, etc., doesn't have time to do, which I think is great.
Cool. So what did we all think of like the story in general? So Tom, you already sort of talked about it, that is Wanda in control? There might be an external force. What do you think, Dave? Do you think she's in control of the situation? Because the show keeps on telling you one thing, and then something else reveals itself to maybe question that. Because, you know, with the little Easter eggs of S.W.O.R.D. coming in there, which we'll talk about in a sec, and, you know, obviously that it seems like somebody is maybe watching her from some sort of, you know, footage of some kind. But then there's the element of when we saw the mysterious beekeeper that Wanda said no, or something like, or stop it, or something like that, and somehow reversed time to a point earlier in the episode. So it's throwing you all these things that's really making you question who's in control here. But what do you think, Dave?
Well, I think what's interesting about it is that, again, like, you know, Tom said, and I think what is probably another, you know, there's several reasons they probably dropped the 2 episodes at once, but what works about it is the kind of the 50s and 60s kind of work together. But I think that, like Tom alluded to, is that this show is going to sort of keep evolving and keep changing. And the genius thing that they've done here is that, again, it's going to have like these different tones every week. So it somewhat comes talking about the formula of the show as well, is that it's a great story and a great tone or style for them to adopt, because it means that then all the kind of MCU or comic nuts can kind of, after it's done, it'd be like, hey, you know, I can already see the montages on YouTube of every opening to WandaVision, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. You know, somebody's going to compile all those together. And, you know, so the show is going to keep feeling different. It's going to keep changing in that way. But what I find, and, you know, and what makes it work so much, especially for the story, I think if you had, you know, we said about the script is really good, but the story wouldn't work as well if you didn't completely engross yourself in the style of those sitcoms. So say they had just made the first episode just black and white and kind of just had the 50s dress and stuff, then yeah, you would still get that, but it might have just come across as gimmicky. But, you know, they actually set it so that, like, the camera style is, like, you know, just basic cuts, wide shots, close-up, wide shot, close-up, wide shot. There's nothing technical in there. And you've got the canned laughter. You've got the, you know, tea towels hanging by strings and all that kind of stuff. All of that really sells it, and I think that that's another element that makes this work so well and adds to the charm of it, along with the performances. But what I find interesting is that yeah, you've got this mystery element to it. You've got, like, you know, the blood, you got the helicopters you mentioned earlier, you got the radio, so saying, like, Wanda, you know, who's doing this to you, all this kind of stuff, which is adding to that, like, oh, what's going on here? And yeah, I found it interesting at the end of the episodes how it is, you know, somebody's watching this on a TV screen and there was actual credits, because you kind of think, well, this is Wanda's reality, she's kind of made this in her head. But it's like, is she broadcasting the episodes to, like, that sound like, is she, like, because you think, like, okay, so in my head, I'm kind of imagining that, like, there's this, like, where she's lived or she's taken this place and kind of, you know, like, absorbed the people of the community into this narrative or whatever. But then the fact that there's actual opening sequences and actual credits that somebody is watching on a television, I'm like, is Wanda actually producing her television show? Because I kind of assumed that it was all kind of like, this is just what she was seeing and what she was living and what everyone else was living. But the fact that there is an actual product at the end of it, I'm like, what? It's like, is she actually broadcasting this?
Well, one thing I found very interesting, which in my journeys through the internet, like seeing people's reactions to the show, that I haven't seen many, if any, people point out, is, you know, in the second episode where she goes to that committee meeting and she makes that friend there who, you know, she points out, like, oh, your pants are peachy keen. That woman.
Yeah.
The interesting thing there was, because I'm pretty sure that actress is meant to be Monica Rambeau, isn't it? Yeah, she's meant to be Monica Rambeau.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, that's Tiona Paris.
I feel like no one picked up on her reaction when Wanda introduces herself, because she says, "Hi, I'm Wanda," and, like, instantly, like, it's like her face very briefly drops and she's just like, oh, Wanda, oh yeah, hi, nice to meet you. And it's just like, I think it's very clear that maybe Monica has, I think it's like David said, I think Wanda's come to this town and somehow absorbed the townspeople into this weird breakdown that she's having, or possible psychic attack that she's having. And so Monica's possibly been, like, just sent in there to maybe, like, see what the hell's going on. Because, like, I did think it was, like, it was very telling in that moment, because, like, she very clearly had a reaction to hearing Wanda's name. So, I mean, it's probably going to turn out maybe she's, like, a member of S.W.O.R.D. or something. Like, I think S.W.O.R.D. are probably trying to help her, just because of S.W.O.R.D.'s history in the comics. They're basically S.H.I.E.L.D. but space, and also other weird stuff as well. So, yeah, I just really don't know which direction it's going to go, really, because as you said as well, Jake, it keeps flipping between things as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, I noticed that connection instantly, because it's not just she hesitates when she hears Wanda's name, she also hesitates to give her own name, because in the trailers we see her introduce herself in the trailers as Monica, and then she's like, wait, do I know you, sort of thing. But in this instance, she hesitates, and then she says, Gabriella, or Gabrielle, or something. I can't quite remember the name.
Geraldine, yeah, I forgot about that.
Geraldine,
yeah.
Sorry. And she hesitates to give her name there, so I'm just a bit like, hang on, something's going on here. But like you, I don't know if she is if she is being manipulated by Wanda's reality, or if she is maybe part of S.W.O.R.D., because it would make sense if Monica Rambeau joined S.W.O.R.D., because, you know, connections through her mum and stuff like that. I don't know. The fact that, you know, she grew up knowing Captain Marvel, so it kind of makes sense. But we'll see. I mean, this show just keeps on throwing different things at you to keep you on your toes, which I love, because I'm just like, yeah, keep throwing me off balance. I don't want the show to be predictable.
Yeah, I think that she's like a S.W.O.R.D. agent. She's been sent in there to try and, like, get her out or do something, investigate it, but has just been taken over by the reality. So that's why they said that name thing has happened, that she's gone in there like, hi, I'm Monica Rambeau, and then gone, oh my God, she's become a part of the narrative or whatever. So I think that that's really fun. And maybe even an aspect you could get later on, be like, you know, you see it in other TV and film shows, you know, where you get like, oh, it turns out that this person was that person, you know, and all this kind of stuff. So it could be that the wife and the husband that come over for dinner could actually be the, I don't know, whatever, you know, the mayor of the town, you know, the actual town she's in, or they could be the head of some company. It's fun stuff like that.
But what does that company actually produce?
We don't know.
I love that whole run of jokes. It was just amazing.
Stop it. 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 Stop it.
Vision, help him.
I would say let's get into performances then. I mean, we already sort of spoke about briefly what we loved about them, but Tom, do you want to add anything extra to the performances from the two leads, or maybe any of the other sort of side characters? I'd like to personally shout out to Deborah Jo Rupp, because as soon as I saw her come on screen, I screamed, "Oi, that's Foreman's mum!"
She's comedy royalty, she is. As soon as I saw her walk in, I was just so happy seeing her.
That was a clapping moment for me. But what, any other performances?
But yeah, I thought Elizabeth Olsen especially gave it was a tour de force, really. I think she got, it was just like, as we said, because they lent so heavily into the 50s, 60s side of comedy, and I feel like Elizabeth Olsen got like just the mannerisms down. Mm-hmm. Like she just kind of invoked that energy of just like 50s sitcom star or 60s sitcom star. Like her facial expressions were amazing, her comedic timing is amazing. But then also when like reality was breaking down or whatever, or just like you see like that helicopter that was in colour and she's freaking out, or that scene with Dottie, it was, and it like shows her like sort of cracking a bit, like she's trying to still keep up this facade of just like happy sitcom life, but she can see that reality's breaking through, and you see that in her performance. And I think, again, like I was saying earlier, her performances are probably only going to get stronger throughout the show as reality continues to break down. And I think she's going to be an Emmy contender herself for like Best Actress or something, because like she does have range on her acting wise, and I think we're really going to get a chance to see that this season. Going to Paul Bettany, I mean, I always knew the guy was pretty funny. I didn't know he was that funny. I mean, in episode 2, when he just proper went like full like London accent, like acting, like obviously acting drunk, but it's just his works are gummed up, which I found hilarious as well. Just one piece of gum like throws Vision through a loop, and he becomes the best Vision possible.
Yeah, it has some great opportunities for some great lines as well. Like I think again at the beginning that shows how good they are in enveloping the style. And I think for like Wanda, or, you know, for Elizabeth Olsen especially, because like I've always had a problem with a lot of people saying that like, oh, isn't it funny that she had this Sokovian accent, then it just disappeared in the next film. I was like, no, it didn't. Like she had it in Civil War. It was like, and I've seen the behind the scenes. They always said that they want to soften it, and yeah, they want to like.
Yeah, because like I'd even argue that in Infinity War, whilst her voice is like more American accent, there's still traces of Sokovian in it. Like there's still the occasional word or line where it does sound like when she says to Thanos in Endgame, "You took everything from me." I heard that in Sokovian, almost like I think just because at that moment she was just so angry and just broken, it just like.
So yeah, I think that, and I've seen the behind the scenes stuff. They said, you know, that's a decision that they've made. They've said that in interviews. They want the idea that she's, you know, she's becoming like a part of the Avengers, and she was, you know, like being trained as like a kind of agent, or, you know, that kind of stuff by Black Widow, etc. So, but it's a deliberate thing that she would sort of like get rid of the accent to like, you know, get rid of like, you know, oh, that's clearly who this person is because of that accent. But what a lot of people said as well with this trailer is that it seems like maybe that comes back once you see Wanda as Wanda in some of the clips later on. So again, I think that's what's so good, is that when she's doing the kind of 50s, 60s stuff, she's very much playing that kind of like character from, you know, I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke Show. She's playing that American stereotype, and the way she just performs it, like when she went like, oh yes, the heart and all this, and like when she's on the phone, she's just like, well, I think we should impress the husband. All of it, none of it seemed gimmicky or like over the top. It was just like the perfect balance. And And like Tom said, I think that Paul Bettany is just so much fun. I love the line where he says, like, I'm incapable of forgetfulness. Like, all of that seemed very Dick Van Dyke, of that kind of era of, like, just, like focusing on one element and just going into like rushed, like quick dialogue. And when he like knocks his head, he's really physical. And I've grown a lot of respect for Paul Bettany from this, when he's just like, yep, screws are all locked in and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
It's like, oh, Vision, you're a computing machine. I assure you I'm not. I'm as human as they come.
I am carbon-based, flesh and blood, life forms.
Yeah. I do need to just, like, because I didn't mention it at the start, because you mentioned Jake, Catherine Hahn. She is one of my favorites as well. She is absolutely fantastic. And I've seen her in stuff before. I've been a fan of her for a while, but she is just something else. Again, I think she's on level with all three of them are fantastic. Obviously she's playing that type of character, but I especially, I loved her introduction, like the idea of just the, like, oh, the husband joke, like, where's my husband? And I loved that, like, I've been out of town because my mother-in-law's been in town, so I've been out of it, and all that kind of stuff. It's just, yeah, and we're gonna have a gas, and she's so, going with it. And just, when I was rewatching it, I was just looking at, like, her smirk and, like, the way she holds herself is really amazing. Like that scene where she has the mailman, she's like, stick him up, and like the way I was like, you're so going for it. And I'm like, this must be so fun on set to play that. I loved it.
Yeah, I've got a feeling as well that her character could become, it's only like a small link, and I could be completely wrong, but like, they're calling her Agnes, and
I know where you're going with this, Tom.
You know where I'm going, don't you? Yeah.
Put a pin on that, because we'll get to that.
We'll put a pin on that. We'll come to that.
We'll come to that. Yeah. No, I echo all your thoughts. Like, Catherine Hahn, like, from the moment she stepped on screen, I was just loving it. The radiance she gave off, like, she was in the role. If we want to talk about lines, there's one particular line I like, because there's also a lot of that they are taking this seriously with the sitcom, but they're also sort of showing us, in a way, what life was like in the 50s and 60s with the housewife persona, how we've evolved since then. But I love the delivery of the line when she said, well, of course, what type of housewife would I be if I didn't have a meal ready for 4 just waiting there? Like,
yeah.
And the way she brought in with all the food, the pots and pans and everything, it was just fantastic. And then there's one line in particular I love, when in episode 2, when they're all at the meeting with all the mothers, and she was like, how can you do this sober? While she's just topping off her drink with whatever that was. But
I was gonna say, I love when they throw back again in that, like, the magic show, and she's just like, she disappeared just like my husband. And I was just like, that's just so good.
Yeah, and as well with Bettany, like, he's going all out for it. He looks like he's having the time of his life. I feel a little bit of his character from Solo coming in here, with the sort of flamboyancy of it. And like you said, Dave, he's being really physical. But again, it's going to the 50s and 60s where physical comedy was such a big thing. It was a lot of, like, slapping and, falling over and that sort of style of comedy. So he just looks like he's having a great time. And I love watching him do this. And I don't know about you guys, but I also I don't think he's real. I think I don't think any of these people might actually be real, but we'll talk about that later and who the other characters might be. But also shout out, I didn't get the actor's name. Maybe you can help me out, Dave, with your IMDb page open. But Dottie, the leader of, like, the mother's community thing there. She was, as well, that performance, she was firm and strict, and I feel as if there's something dodgy about her, and her interaction with Wanda is also interesting. So I like to see how that gets played out. But throughout, there wasn't much cast apart from the 2 leads, Catherine Hahn and Teyonah Parris. But I'm sure we'll get a lot more of her in the future. But I can't wait to see who else comes in the show. We still have. What was the FBI guy called from the Ant-Man movies?
Jimmy Woo.
Jimmy Woo, yes. He's meant to be coming in here. So, that could be him at the end of episode 1. He was the guy on the
radio. Was he the... I think, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are speculating that that's him, like, who's doing to this Wanda. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to all the other future performances. And, Paul Bettany just came out today, I think, or the day before, saying there will be a surprise appearance from someone. So I can't wait.
Those little boys and girls are counting on us. All of this is for the children.
For the children.
For the children.
Do you guys have any particular favorite moments or more like sort of one-liners or gags? Tom, what about you?
Basically, the entire magic show in episode 2 was a particular highlight for me, just like from start to finish. It was just genius. But yeah, as I was also saying, I think some of my favorite moments that were just where the show moved from the sitcom aspect, and it was just like, all right, here's the surrealism now. Here's all this going on. Like in episode 1 where Dr. Hart is choking, his wife is just sat there just going, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. And it just gets creepier and creepier and creepier. And the way as well when Wanda just turns to Vision and is just like, Vision, help him. I love that moment because it was almost as if like the mask was slipping from this whole like reality. So that was one of my favorite moments, to be honest. And then just the immediate like aftermath of Vision has saved him, and the guy just gets straight back up and he's just like, oh well, this has been a very successful dinner, Vision, we'll talk about that promotion tomorrow. And he's like, oh yes, thank you sir. And it's just like, so that was just a very brief breakaway from the sitcom. And as I said, it was like the mask slipping from Wanda. Like it's just showing that like she's definitely not fully in control of this situation she's found herself in. It's just to what degree is the question. So yeah, I loved the little moments like that. But yeah, especially just like if we're talking hilarious moments, just Catherine Hahn, every line she delivered was perfect. I loved that neighborhood watch meeting as well. It's like, Norm, here's a communist. Oh, I love that whole thing was just great.
Yeah, I love that scene in particular when Vision's like, oh, I don't eat in between meals, I eat thoroughly during meals. I'm happy you to food.
It's just like, oh, Vision, I thought you said you didn't eat food. Well, I think gum is purely for mastication. And it's just like, oh, well, I don't do that.
Who's that other dude, the one with the mustache, who's like, raspberry or cream? The guy.
That was my grandmother's piano.
Any highlights for you, Dave?
Speaking of that guy, that's one of my highlights, is when they have that whole like gimmicky, like everything's on the line for the, you know, the meal with the boss, because again, that's such a classic trope. And when he's just like, I thought 5 courses was enough, but it's just the way it ended was just such a perfect way. Just being like, it's just like, I wore a turtleneck. It's just like, I just love that line. Just like, I wore a turtleneck, and that was like that was enough to like get him.
He's like, and that shoddy music performance. What, the string quartet?
Yeah, all of that was like fantastic. It worked really well, and it makes it enjoyable that they have this whole revolving cast, or because that again is a trope of the sitcom. So the fact that you then see him again doing that line about the piano, it works because you're also immediately sort of charmed by the character because he's already said some funny things. I loved, obviously I've mentioned like the Catherine Hahn stuff, all of that was great. I loved the like in the dinner sequence, I loved, like Wanda clicking herself into the new outfit. I think again that was like a perfect representation of how invested in the idea like the show and Elizabeth Olsen is. Because if you like the watch, once she clicks and she's in the new dress, just the way she does it and the smile she has, I'm like she nails like how to do that kind of like, Bewitched kind of like kooky little 50s magic kind of stuff. And yeah, also the fact that if anybody said, like, oh, what do you think Vision and Wanda will be doing in like future MCU stuff? If you just played a clip of Vision playing Old MacDonald on a ukulele, I don't think anybody would ever think that was going to happen. Just the vision of Vision playing the ukulele was, singing Old MacDonald. It was just classic. I just loved it. It was so funny.
It's just a bit as well where just like the wife is getting into it, and like he then turns to Mr. Hart because he's like, and on that farm he had a duck.
Yeah, it was great. But also then, going into like the moments like episode 2, I think like the opening especially, because obviously there we had the animation, which was really fun, and you've set up that idea where the colleague drinks the water and then Vision can't drink it, and he like chucks it behind him and his boss is behind him. I'm like, oh, that's again such a classic, like, oh no, he spilled water on the boss. I loved that, and it's a really catchy tune. Just that, like WandaVision,
Vision,
WandaVision.
WandaVision.
And the fact all the neighbors were singing it as they went past, I was like, that was a great touch. So yeah, I really loved the opening of that episode as well. It was fantastic.
Raspberry or cheese filled?
Oh, neither for me, thank you. I don't eat food. What I mean to say is that I don't eat food in between meals, but at meal times. Oof, I'm a regular eater of sheep.
Fantastic. So let's move on to the next one, which is a fun one. Easter eggs, MCU ones, comic connections. What have you guys got? Because I've got quite a few. I'd like to point out that is also one of my favorite moments is that in between the episodes, the ads that we got.
Yes. Yes.
I remember Kevin Feige saying this a couple of weeks ago, saying, "Oh, there will be ads on the show as well." And I was like, "Oh, how's that going to work?" Like, I was like, "I hope it's not an actual ad, like it's in the middle of Disney Plus." Like,
Go watch Loki on August 1st.
yeah, I was like, "Oh, I hope they don't do that." But no, it's creative ads to part with the show, and I love the Stark toaster. And from the first time when they pressed the button down, you heard the pulse sort of thing of Tony Stark. I love that. And then in the second episode, the Strucker watch. And I also I don't think it's by accident that these two names are used in the ads. For one, because, you know, from the beginning, she didn't have a high opinion of Tony. You know, she, basically blames him for parents' death. And Strucker is obviously the man who, manipulated her and did all sorts of experiments to create the powers and stuff. So I think there's a reason why those two names are in the ads.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. I also did love the whole the toaster thing, because that's an insult that many characters in the comics throw at Vision. Like when they're annoyed at him, they'll call him Toaster or Toaster Head or something like that. A couple of people also pointed out, I'm going to have to rewatch it, but a couple of people pointed out that the toaster bear a striking resemblance to either Vision or Ultron. So I'm definitely going to have to go back and look at that again, because that would be pretty cool if true. Especially if it's Ultron. I think that'd be a nice touch.
I just can't believe that this toaster can apparently do meatloaf and open cheese sandwiches as well.
Well, it's a Stark toaster, so
Yeah.
Could do a lot.
it could probably file your taxes as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you also guys noticed the wine bottle that was
Yes.
a reference
Yes.
to House of M.
Yeah, because I think it was Maison du Mépris. I don't know what the Mépris word is, but yeah, it was a very clear House of M reference. So I was glad they chucked that in. But yeah, I'm also damn sure that Agnes is meant to be a nod to Agatha Harkness in the comics. Like, I'm not 100%, but I think, yeah.
Again, I have a theory about that, but I'll get to that in a second. But an Easter egg I did see, which I think relates to Agatha Harkness, is that, when Wanda's grocery shopping, in the background there's ads for two things. One is Bova milk, which, if you know the comics, that's a mutated cow that serves as Wanda's nurse. And there's also Auntie A's cat litter, which I think is Agatha Harkness, because she is a witch, and she had a cat. So there's that, and I don't know if you caught this one, Tom, or even you, Dave, but the helicopter that wound up, the colored helicopter, the number on it is 57, and Avengers issue 57 is the first appearance of Vision.
Oh.
So there's a couple
that's
there that
nice.
I spotted. Any others for you, or any MCU connections?
For me, I just was picking out as well, like I liked when Wanda was doing the magic when she was cooking the meal and everything, that you could see that she was doing the kind of classic Wanda, like Elizabeth Olsen has always said about, she, the way she moves her fingers and hands. So you could see that was coming into play when she was doing that, and she was doing the whole, chicken thing, and she was, moving her fingers and be like, oh, oops, and all that kind of stuff. Which, again, another classic moment when she goes oh, no, I've reversed the chicken. That was great. But also just the emphasis on red. which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if that's just a kind of like an artistic thing or just like a reference to, you know, Scarlet Witch, or whether that will be a bigger thing as a part of the story. I don't know. But the fact that, you know, the helicopter is red, the blood, which is obviously red. So the only things that seep through from reality seem to be like red things. And I'm interested whether the helicopter is actually red, or again, it's to do with like the only thing she's seeing is red. But also when they went into color, you know, I kind of just assumed she was wearing some sort of like navy or, you know, like more sort of color that would have been more fashionable at that time. But she's wearing like a red outfit, which of course, you know, Scarlet Witch and everything. But I didn't realize then until afterwards as well, the gum the Vision eats is called Big Red Gum. So I was just like, so there's loads of like reference to like, you know, red and, you know, scarlet.
I've actually got some
so
theories relating to that, but I'll wait till we talk about theories and speculation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, I enjoyed those, and I think with the ads, I think that potentially if the next one we get is something like Ultron related, I wouldn't be surprised if it is like Wanda's story told in advert form. So if it's like, you know, Ultron, then something about you know, blowing up a building, you know, whatever, then that might be like her narrative told in ad form.
I think the other Easter egg I've got, which is last one I can think of that hasn't already been mentioned, is actually came during the featurette for it. And like, because I think in the background there was just like showing like all these other sort of comedy shows going on like around with WandaVision, and one of them made reference to Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man, who in the comics is actually tied into Wanda and Vision in a very heavy way, because Vision's brain patterns were actually based off of Simon Williams's brain patterns. There's also like, that's probably why Vision and Wanda ended up together, because Wonder Man had a crush on Wanda in the comics, and I think they did have a relationship before. I think James Gunn has referenced him before in the Guardians films and said that he'd like, I think even Nathan Fillion may have filmed a couple of scenes as him, which never made it to the final cut. So it'll be interesting to see if they end up bringing Wonder Man into the fold, because as I say, he is tied into the characters a lot. And also, that does tie into another Easter egg. There was, I can't remember where it was, but there's just a bit where Vision is like looking around at some stuff, and in the corner you can see like a helmet that looks very similar to this helmet worn by one of Vision's enemies in the comics called the Grim Reaper, who is also Wonder Man's brother. So there's a lot of references there to that sort of grouping of characters. So again, it would be interesting to see if they amount to anything more than just Easter eggs, just little nods to the comics and like how the characters came to be, or whether it is maybe setting up something a bit later on. We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Looking at Marvel's track record, they don't put anything there by accident. I think every move and every reference they do is intentional in some way or another. For even if it's something we don't see maybe relatively soon, down the line, that will be picked up upon, you know? So let's sort of talk about the connections and references to the sitcoms. Dave, you sort of mentioned up top the Dick Van Dyke Show. I thought the kitchen itself was pretty much the same kitchen as the Dick Van Dyke Show. And the opening theme kind of stylistically sounds similar to the Donna Reed Show. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. And then I thought the most obvious one, which at first I didn't quite get it. I was like, what is this? And it's the beginning of episode 2 where we have the animation intro. And I was like, what is this? What is this? And it took me like until sort of it finished. I was like, that is Bewitched. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that show, but even down to the plots in Bewitched, you know, that there's a housewife and she's doing the housewife things all by doing magic, waving her hands around, doing the dishes and cooking and stuff like that. So that was, you know, really nice to see. And then, you know, just some of the plot details about forgotten anniversaries or bosses showing up for dinner and stuff like that. That's all sort of really classic sitcom stuff. So is there any of the others that you popped out? You mentioned, I Love Lucy?
Yeah. I think just more like stylistically, I was like getting a lot of Lucy from Wanda, like the way she was dressed in episode 1, the way she looked, the way she carried herself as well, and also just the whole again sitcom trope of a housewife being overwhelmed by like everything going on, but then like managing to pull it all off at the last second. With, like breakfast for dinner? How European.
And I think there's the Dick Van Dyke Show, I Love Lucy. I think, Bewitched is clearly what they were doing as well. Some even like the opening where they kind of like float around, the kind of way the characters move and that kind of stuff. And even if you don't know the TV show, there was like a really like bad movie adaptation like a few years ago of that with Will Ferrell. But yeah, I think other ones people have mentioned, like the Mary Tyler Moore Show and I Dream of Jeannie. That's like another one where, so it's again the kind of like, you know, woman who has supernatural powers, that kind of stuff.
Who are you?
Wanda. Who's doing this to you, Wanda? Wanda.
Let's then go on to theories and speculation. I mean, just bear in mind, people listening, we could be completely wrong. This is just us spouting some bullshit, but I've got a couple of things. I think, now it could be a bit of a stretch, but I think the way she has been played, especially in that second episode, Dottie, I think could be Mephisto. And I think, I don't know for sure yet, but as you said, Agnes is a reference to Agatha Harkness, and I think Agatha Harkness actually is Agnes in some way, because in the trailers as well, I can't remember, I think it was, you know, where we see them dressing up in Halloween costumes? Agnes is dressed as a witch.
Yeah.
And Agatha Harkness is a witch, so I don't know, I could be stretching, but I do think those two could possibly be.
I don't think it's much of a stretch, because like I said, because of all the references to red, like, yeah, the obvious thing is that it's a reference to Scarlet Witch, because, you know, it's, you know, you're going to think like, yeah, she's Scarlet Witch, so there's a lot of red appearing. But also, Mephisto, famously red, and as well as that, the fact that like Wanda ends up like pregnant at the end of the second episode, and you know, many people are probably thinking, oh yeah, she's just using her magic to just make herself pregnant. But in the comics, Wanda made herself pregnant with her two kids, Tommy and Billy. I can't remember the exact specifics of it, but she utilized like Mephisto's soul or essence to create those children, and then when Mephisto was able to like reconstitute himself, children disappeared, and that's what actually ended up driving Wanda down the path to Avengers Disassembled and then House of M when she lost a complete grip on reality. So I don't think any of these sort of clues or references are just that. I don't think they're just references or nods to the comics. I think there is a definite build-up here. The only thing that throws me off is Beekeeper Man. Like what's his deal? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is this some game Mephisto is playing? Is he a completely new thing?
Well, what I've seen people throw around, and I was like, oh yeah, that could actually work, is that people have always said that AIM have always had like a bee sort of hive logo.
Or even their outfits, actually, quite like that.
The outfits true, yeah. that they look like sort of beekeepers in a way, so people are saying it could be related to AIM. But at the same time, when we saw the beekeeper coming out, they got the sword logo in the back.
Yeah, I thought that. And that was on the helicopter as well. Or it could just be, you know, like I said, Jake, we've watched Jupiter Ascending recently. Maybe, you know, bees understand royalty. Maybe they're just, you know, like, maybe there's some sort of affiliation there, and Wanda's going to come queen of the bees.
This is where her plot has been leading for all the MCU. Another theory I have of, just because of how the scene was played, and just because of like specifically Wanda's reaction when she starts seeing color return to Vision, it's almost like, so if Mephisto is involved, and whether he's a willing participant in what Wanda is doing, because like especially with the Dottie scene, if we assume Dottie is Mephisto, it didn't seem like he was too happy about Wanda just being there and doing stuff. It was almost as if he was like kind of just like, can you please leave? You're really bugging me, sort of thing. So if we're then going from the comics that she utilized like Mephisto's soul to create her children, maybe she's also doing that to bring Vision back to life, and maybe the whole moving from black and white to him coming to color is him becoming more real again, and eventually he will actually be properly back in the universe without like the need for Wanda's magic to help him sustain himself in that universe. Like he'll just be back and real, and I say in the flesh, in the silicon.
Yeah, because that's why I found interesting again is that he's like pretty much like a red character as well. So again, there was the first thing that you see come into color is his face. So I thought that was interesting as well. Is that the colors are almost alluding again to sort of like who she's trying to bring back.
But again, we could be completely wrong. We could be completely wrong, and maybe Vision is actually the bad guy in the whole thing. He's come back from the grave to torture Wanda. Unlikely, but it's as likely as anything else at this point. We just don't know.
Well, I was actually going to ask, because I've sort of been predicting this theory for a while, and Dave can attest to that I think by the end of this, Wanda could become the villain, and I think I don't know if she's the main protagonist of the Doctor Strange sequel, but I think she's definitely the cause for the need of that movie,
yes,
if you know what I mean.
And like I was saying to David the other day, I think it's like, I mean, obviously the pandemic has sort of helped with this regard, but as we said, like WandaVision's the first new MCU project we've seen in a while. It should have been Black Widow, but it wasn't. That's been pushed back. But I think past COVID, because they have been pushing it back so much, despite the fact the film is objectively ready, it is because they are trying to use WandaVision as the like starting point of, I guess, the new MCU, the post-Endgame MCU. And the way that they, like, all these stories, because initially I saw people just complaining that what are we on now? Phase 4? Phase 5? We're on Phase 4. Yeah, I saw a lot of people complaining that all the films and stuff they announced didn't seem to like have any like overarching plots or didn't seem to connect with each other in any way. And people were like, is this just like a gap stop before Phase 5 and like the proper story start again? But as you said, she's clearly going to be responsible for the events that happen in Doctor Strange. We then know Spider-Man 3 is dealing with heavy multiverse implications, and the Doctor Strange is going to be in that as well. So yeah, it is going to be maybe interesting to see whether Wanda does make a turn to sort of being a villain in the MCU, much like how in the comics she technically became a villain, though it wasn't fully her fault. I mean, like, it's the classic thing. She was clearly mentally ill whilst dealing with powers she didn't understand. So it's quite difficult to call her a villain. It feels a little unfair to her. But essentially, yeah, she could end up filling that role, and maybe maybe in Doctor Strange 2, it's not going to be a case of Strange helping out Wanda. Maybe it's going to be a case of Strange has to try and stop Wanda before she goes too far.
I also think, obviously we're getting references to House of M. Is there the possibility of she could also be the cause of how mutants are introduced into the MCU? They could like flip that storyline in the sense of like in House of M, she said no more mutants and wiped out pretty much all the mutants apart from the main cast of characters.
Yeah, just all the mutants.
This one she just says all mutants. Yeah, but obviously in a much cleverer way. That's why I'm not writing the show. They could figure out a way that could be interesting to bring the mutants in. I don't know. I was just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been theorizing that since the show was announced, and I kind of agree that it could be a way to do it, but I don't know if it's the best way. So far, the best way I've heard of integrating the mutants into the MCU is just have it be an effect of the various snaps, because they really put a big amount of explanation into how much energy is coming out of the gauntlet when you use it. So that's used twice on Earth, once by Hulk, once by Tony. You have to assume,
and once by Thanos.
Yeah, I did. He did use it on Earth. Yes, you are right. He used it in Wakanda. My bad. I forgot about that. I thought he was on Titan when he did the snap. I completely blanked on that. But yeah, so you could easily make an explanation of, because of all that cosmic energy, that infinite energy being channeled on Earth, that would have an effect and cause these mutations. So you're maybe starting the mutants fresh versus what people think they're going to do and just fold the X-Men into the universe as just oh, they weren't here, but now they're here and established.
Yeah, and I think we'll see it more probably next week and in maybe the week after that. But I think when you mentioned about the twins and stuff, I think it would be really important for what they're going forward, and I would imagine they'd want to do it, is bring in Speed and Wiccan, because they're such a big part of like the Young Avengers and stuff like that. I think that would be like a great choice. So again, to me, I wouldn't say like what I want out of the show is then like X-Men, Fantastic Four. As long as they've got like those two characters, I think like, yeah, those would be great byproducts of this show, and whether they can find some way of aging them up so that they'll be ready to go into, a Young Avengers series or film or whatever.
I hear what you mean, and I also thought that, the twins could eventually play into the Young Avengers, but at the same time, I also think, I don't know which route they're going to go with the story, because there's also another storyline where Wanda has a miscarriage, which then obviously causes her to lose it a bit. So I don't know, they might go that route as well, which, further, that could be the reason or the distraught of losing her children, and also realizing that Vision is truly dead and all that sort of thing. That could spark the whole thing. I don't know. It depends how they want to play with it, really.
Whoops! You weren't supposed to see how we did that trick.
That was my grandmother's piano.
I do just want to mention as well the credits, because we said, again, I can maybe bring this up in terms of like negatives of it, but there probably are a lot of Easter eggs in the credits as well, because even they're showing things that maybe will be reoccurring elements and themes. So you get the different logos and emblems. You see like Vision's headpiece. You see the house. Again, we were talking about red earlier, the rose, they mention, oh, your rose bushes. And then in the credits, they have like a red rose like made up of those lights. So there's obviously, again, whether that's just the red thing or whether that's more of a, again, sort of reference to Mephisto and stuff like that. I guess with witches, that's always a thing, isn't it? Like the garden, like reaping the garden and all that kind of stuff. So that might be an element of it with Agnes, etc. So I think that there might be a few things in that credit sequence which could be like nods to what are going to be the bigger themes, because they've got these different emblems. They got the wedding rings at the end, because I thought maybe that's just going to be in the end of the first episode, but then it was at the end of the second one as well. And I was like, oh, right. So, because I thought maybe they'll have something different at the end of each one, but there were lots of these emblems and logos, which, as we know in Marvel end credit scenes, are always parts of the story. You have like, animations of like the shields and the gauntlet and all that kind of stuff.
Going back to what you said about nods in the credits, though, just like as well how in the credits like everything kind of like breaks down into blocks, which in House of M and Avengers Disassemble, when Wanda was messing with reality, that's how things were like breaking apart. It was by these like just cubes. So I thought that was a nice like
it's that famous comic cover where
exactly
faces breaking away kind of thing.
I did agree that I think the worst part of the credits though is just the fact that, and it is a Disney Plus thing, is you've got like these overly long credits, and then just it's another like 3 or 4 minutes of just like, oh yeah, and this is the Spanish voice cast, this is the Italian voice cast, this is the Japanese voice cast, this is the Danish voice cast, this is
yeah.
Because I was there just like scrolling through going, there's got to be a post-credit scene or something, but then it's just, no, this is literally all credits. And
no.
Yeah, it just means that the advertised runtime is very misleading. I don't appreciate that.
Exactly, yeah.
I think we can all agree that 7 minutes of credits is a bit overboard. And, we spoke about it as well in the Mondaylorians. It's very misleading when they have 2 minutes extra of, all the dubbing actors, which, they obviously do need to get credit, but it is very misleading with the runtime.
Yeah, but I don't think they have to do that on Amazon and Netflix. But again, this is why I'm not even throwing it at the Disney Plus side of things. It's not, my problem isn't even with the foreign language thing. Again, you can kind of like after a while be like, okay, the 2 minutes, I know that's going to be a foreign thing. But they're almost Marvel themselves are doubling this up. They're having this big like flashy end credit sequence with all these like lights and blocks and all that kind of stuff, saying, starring Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, all this. And then they have another one, which is like the 50s sort of music, which says the cast again. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, so that's why I'm not willing to say this is a Disney Plus thing. Marvel has done it to themselves. They've put like a big flashy end credit sequence, and they've put like a normal end credit sequence and the foreign stuff. which, like Tom said, is very misleading because it makes you think that the episodes are longer. But also, and this is why I think it's still a Marvel problem, is that I don't think a 22-minute episode deserves a massive 5-minute, because again, we're so used to that being at the end of movies, and I think that The Mandalorian gets away with it because it's showing you like the highlights of the episode in some sort of way, like the concept art, and again, you don't have to watch that, but we're so used to being like, oh, I need to watch through this because there might be an end credit scene, and Disney Plus again doesn't minimize itself until it gets to the normal credits, so it makes it seem like something's coming. So I don't know why they didn't keep this sequence till like episode 9 or something, just put it at the end. And it kind of ruined the sitcom vibe for me. I kind of would have preferred if they just had the person writing, seeing it on the TV, and then just go to the normal, normal scrolling credits. I feel that it like exaggerated things and was like, I've seen it before, and I've had problems with this, like with filmmaking and stuff, where it's like you make like a 3-minute short, and then you make like 2 minutes of credits as if you're trying to be like a big film. It's like, well, you're not though. You're not like a film. This is like a 22-minute episode, so. I don't get it. I don't know why they decided to go with... I know what they're doing, that they're saying, oh, it's the MCU, we need to have these big things. But I just don't think that the runtime deserves something that long after it. My only other flaw with these like episodes, and maybe it's more towards episode 1, is again, I just would have, rather than just that person writing on the, seeing the TV screen, I think the episode 1 just needed something like somebody in a room just saying, like, again, whether it be Jimmy Woo or... was it Darcy Lewis? I think it just needed somebody saying like, are you monitoring it? It just needed, I'm not saying we wanted like a 10-minute sequence. I just wanted something just to justify it a bit. I think because they either should have just had the WandaVision credits and then bring the credits and not show anybody writing something, or you show somebody writing something, watching it on the TV, and then have some sort of character. I don't think it was enough just to show somebody's hand. I think I would have liked to get a bit more about, the kind of mystery element of being like, okay, we know that people are monitoring it. Whereas I feel that we only know that people are like on their outside because, again, of the trailers and hearing they're like, Wanda, what's happening? All this kind of stuff. So, and I don't know. So episode 2, give me a bit of that because you had the beekeeper thing, you had the pregnancy, you had the rewind. So there was a bit of an element of like, oh, things are changing, things are going on. But I felt the episode 1 just needed something just to add a bit more like, this is why you should keep watching kind of thing.
I think I disagree with you. I liked that they gave us very minimal stuff because I didn't maybe need a familiar face straight away because it's maybe, I don't know, too predictable maybe or something like that. I like the ambiguity of it. That's just me anyway. Yeah.
It might just be the combination though. Again, I think they could have maybe made it work watching it on the screen and then just go into credits. But I think it's the fact that they showed the screen and then this like elaborate credit sequence and then still nothing. I'm like, do you know what I mean? It's like you've had this entire 20 minutes of 50s stuff and then you like show only like a modern day setting like for 2 seconds at the end and then like a modern day end credit sequence. So I'm like, so I think they either should have tied in together that end credit sequence with a bit more sword stuff. Just, again, just literally a minute, just somebody's face or somebody saying, like, what's happening? Are you keeping a track of it? Just a line, that's all I would have needed. Or just scrap it all and just keep the ambiguity kind of thing.
I don't know. I think, in parts, I kind of agree with you. I did find myself in the first episode kind of thinking, like, well, what is the broader context? Like, is she in a coma? Is she just in a town? Is she in, like, a bubble somewhere? Like, it would have been nice to just get maybe, like, a little bit of clarity. But equally, because, as I said, like, one of my favourite moments in the show so far has been that choking scene in episode 1. I think that did enough for me to just, like, make me realise, right, like, just, it's almost like it made me realise in that moment that until they just directly tell me, it doesn't fully matter, like, how this is set up and, like, how Sword plays into it. Because I do kind of like the ambiguity. Like, you don't know if Sword is helping or hindering her. You don't know, like, how involved they are. Like, we're thinking Mephisto is going to be showing up. And, again, we don't know in what context. Because, like, you'd be thinking initially, like, he's going to be the big villain. But if we're correct in assuming Dottie is Mephisto, or at least a manifestation of him, he didn't look happy about Wanda being there. So how control is he of the situation, or she if it's Dottie, whatever. So I kind of like that, because it is kind of just building up that this whole situation that Wanda's found herself in is incredibly chaotic, and we're not going to get answers straight away, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay like having it be a slow burn, because I just love the way it's set up, and I do love like how they do break from like hilarious comedy to some serious stuff, and then snapping straight back into the comedy, like almost as it almost seems like almost as if like Wanda's about to realize something or come to some like idea, and then it's just like, oh no, we're back in the comedy now, we're back here, it's all good.
I definitely agree with you on all of that. And I think, to be fair, this probably will be a problem that I think will be rectified. Is probably, again, expectations is something that later in the series, but okay, I've got what I wanted. So, but because it's a weekly series, I'm just surprised that they didn't add something to be like, oh.
I think that's maybe why they released the first 2 episodes in one go, because then the second episode, I think, really helps like cement the various like things that are going to make you want to watch the show, like, you know, the little mysteries, like who is the beekeeper, how is Wanda like controlling all this reality, like and to what extent. I think like I would definitely be more siding with David's views on this if they had just released episode 1 and then released episode 2 next week. I'd probably also be like, well, I would have liked a little something, but I think because they did the double release, it worked.
When you put it like that, I would agree with you, because they had the second episode attached. It gave me more of that I feel as if I didn't need it in the first episode. But yeah, if they had just released the first episode, I would agree with you. Yeah, it would probably have me wanting more. And I think it's also interesting to note that I think the next episode, episode 3, will be a big change, because it's 9 episodes. So I'm thinking it's going to be every 3 episodes is the first arc, second arc is the next 3 episodes, and then the finale is the last 3 episodes. And it's also worth noting that all the critics, they got the first 3 episodes to review. I mean, I think we should finish it sort of our general consensus. I thought both these episodes were fantastic. It's a really bold and interesting direction the MCU is taking, accompanied by some really good performances from the both leads and also the supporting cast. There's a lot of mystery, a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of speculation, but I like the vibe they've gone for, and I look forward to where this show is going. It's a hooking show, because you just don't know what's going to happen next. So what are your sort of final thoughts on this series, on the first 2 episodes?
Yeah, so for myself, I think that like everything we've said, you know, it's really bold television. It's fantastic, the style they've gone with. I think the performances are absolutely excellent, and I think I can't wait to see this element of, you know, going through the different eras every single week. I think it's going to get very fun, especially the fact that they're meant to be coming up to like modern day. I think there's like been speculation that the most recent sitcom will be like in the style of Modern Family. So I'm really excited about seeing Vision talking to camera. But again, I don't want to get too hyped if that isn't a thing. But I think, again, you know, either way, we're going to get 80s, 90s. That's all going to be really fun, because we love that era of sitcoms because we grew up during it. And yeah, I think that this all like Tom said, you know, the idea of the, you know, the stop scene with the choking, that was a great, you know, creepy sort of disturbing element, which I hope there's more of again. And I loved in the trailers where it's the peeling of reality and all that kind of stuff is fantastic. I do see them as separate entities. I think you need to make episode 1 and episode 2 work, and that's why I had that just bit of a niggle with the end of episode 1, because I think you need to make it a standalone thing. But maybe they did always intend it to be. We know that these 2 episodes are going to be released together, but I still think if you're going to separate something, you need to make them work on their own merits as well. But that, again, that's just a little niggle, and I think that the season will like rectify that a lot, because I think it's very much like front heavy with the sitcom stuff, and then more the end is going to be coming into the sort of more realistic story heavy things. So I'm just going to have fun with all of the sitcom stuff that we have for now, and you know, the trivia and, you know, Easter eggs and all the kind of stuff that's building up to that. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, as I said, it's like outside of the superhero genre, I think it's going to be one of the bolder shows to come out in recent years, and I think it's going to be a good like breakaway for the genre as well, because I think like the only annoying thing is, even when like sort of comic book films and that try and like do things a little differently, they still get pigeonholed as just like comic book films, like these are superhero films. Like even I think like there's a couple of exceptions within the MCU, like maybe Winter Soldier can be counted as a exception, but I think still people do view it as a superhero property more than anything. I think WandaVision is going to be that sort of cross-genre hit where basically, even though people respect the fact that these are Marvel characters, this is a Marvel property and it ties into the MCU, I think it's going to work so well in its own regard that, as we were talking about earlier, you don't need to be an MCU fan to like enjoy it. I think it's enjoyable for anyone. I think if we're right in our ideas on how the plot is going to unfold, and if the writers continue nailing it as they have for the first 2 episodes, then, as I said before, the show's only going to get better and better with each episode, and I think by the end of it, people are likely going to be talking about it on the same level as like early era Game of Thrones, or like definitely not like the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, but like I think it's going to be one of those big shows that everyone ends up talking about when it's done with. That's my thoughts on it anyway. I could be completely wrong. Maybe by the end of it, people will just be like, oh, that was kind of cool, but yeah, it's still a superhero show. But I think it has potential, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, but I think it definitely has that potential to be something really special. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, we've seen some bolder superhero TV as of late, you know, what with The Boys and stuff like that. So you know, Marvel have got to do something interesting. And I think from the first 2 episodes, they've definitely caught the people's attention. And like you said, Tom, this could definitely be the next big thing that people talk about for the next few weeks, very much like we had with The Mandalorian. So very excited to be doing this podcast with you guys, talking about it, discussing it, laughing about it. I can't wait to see where the show goes next. So as we get out of here, Tom, we're going to plug away. Where can the people find you? Are you on any socials?
Well, yeah, I've got a Twitter account which I'm starting to try and use a bit more often. I can't even remember my Twitter handle now, though, off the top of my head. I'll probably, like, as we start doing more of these, I'll probably just get a bit more active on Twitter and Facebook in general. Maybe even set up like a Facebook page or something. Like, I don't know, Tom the Comic Guru or something like that. So, well, okay, there we go. My Twitter handle is apparently @GapperBoy, and that's boy spelled B-O-I. So at the moment, my Twitter is just full of me talking about how I don't tweet that often. But if you feel like my comic book knowledge drops, then I'll start just using that a bit more. But yeah, as I said, if we start doing more of these shows, I'll be a bit more visible on social media. And then you can all just like take my thoughts as gospel truth.
Nice. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, you can catch me as usual again on Twitter @David Osgar. You can catch me on Letterboxd, and yeah, that's the main places you'll see me like talking about film and, you know, rating, reviewing, that kind of stuff. If you want to see my, you know, controversial opinions on different things, and also on Fresh Take Hub on the website, you know, where I'm writing. And yeah, hopefully I got a lot of exciting stuff coming up in 2021.
You're also doing the weekly written reviews for WandaVision, aren't you?
Yeah, so if you go on to freshtakehub.com, then you can find written reviews for each episode. So similar to how we did with The Mandalorian, we'll have different people reviewing each episode, but we've decided with this one to make it a bit more... so like some people will get 2 episodes, some people will get 1 episode, etc. So, you know, maybe people can follow up with their thoughts on the previous one. So this week we should have our very talented writer, Ali, who'll be talking about episodes 1 and 2. So please go check that out.
Nice. And myself, you can find me on Twitter @SweatyJake, and as well as Dave, I'm also on Letterboxd @Jake Hart. So you can get all my hot takes on films on there. And I've got some opinions, I can tell you. But for the show, you can find us. We're also on Twitter and on Facebook @Capes, Cows and Mask. And subscribe to us and follow us on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, whatever you use to listen to your podcast. And, you know, reach us out on Twitter. Let us know what you thought of the first 2 episodes, what you think was going to happen next. And if you're feeling generous as well on Apple Podcast, reviews will also help us. So give us a like, share, and follow, and spread the word to all your friends. And with that, everyone, stay safe and take it easy. See you later, guys.
Ta-ra.
Bye-bye.
WandaVision, 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 WandaVision.